Ba-da-dum, ba-da-da, dun-dun-dun, bum-ba-da-da. What's up? What's up? What's up? Ultima, Eros Knight. Welcome to to the Ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I do this about like once a week for about an hour on Thursdays, so a little different from Elden Ring, but we'll be back to it. Don't worry, everybody. Do not worry. We'll get back into Elden Ring here and here pretty soon. Hi, Lithadora. Do not panic! Don't panic! Alright, cool. We'll probably kick into it, here soon. Just trying to think of some, like, what happened last week. I feel like there's been so much, like, IRL, like, life stuff going on that, like, it's hard for me to even remember, but, Ford and Arthur got kicked out of the ship with the Vogons, and then they were flying through space and basically got picked up by that infinite improbability, like, vessel or jet or spaceship, whatever it was, and now they're on there. Hey, Tomar, reread Rainbow. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing good. Yeah, alright. Let me swap over to the old book here, and we will get going. Alright, let's see. Chapter 11. The improbability-proof control cabin of the Heart of Gold looked like a perfectly conventional spaceship, except that it was perfectly clean because it was so new. Some of the control seats hadn't had the plastic wrapping taken off yet. The cabin was mostly white, oblong, and about the size of a smallish restaurant. In fact, it wasn't perfectly oblong. The two long walls were raked round in a slight parallel excuse me, in a slight parallel curve, and all the angles and corners of the cabin were contoured in excitingly chunky shapes. The truth of the matter is that it would have been a great deal simpler and more practical to build the cabin as an ordinary three-dimensional oblong room, but then the designers would have got miserable. As it was, the cabin looked excitingly purposeful, with large video screens ranged over the control and guidance system panels on the concave wall, and long banks of computers set into the convex wall. In one corner, a robot sat humped, its gleaming brushed steel head hanging loosely between its gleaming brushed steel knees. It, too, was fairly new, but though it was beautifully constructed and polished, it somehow looked as if the various parts of its more or less humanoid body didn't quite fit properly. In fact, they fitted perfectly well, but something in its bearing suggested that they might have fitted better. Zaphod Beeblebrox paced nervously up and down the cabin, brushing his hands over pieces of gleaming equipment and giggling with excitement. Trillian sat hunched over a clump of instruments, reading off figures. Her voice was carried around the Tannoy system of the whole ship. 5-1 against and falling, she said. 4-1 against and falling. 3-1. 2. 1. Probability factor of 1-1. We have normality. I repeat, we have normality. She turned her microphone off. Then it turned back on. With a slight smile, she continued, Anything you still can't cope with is therefore your own problem. Please relax. You will be sent for soon. Zaphod burst out in annoyance. Who are they, Trillian? Trillian spun her head around to face him and shrugged. Just a couple of guys we seem to have picked up in open space, she said. Section ZZ, plural Z Alpha. Yeah, well that's a pretty sweet thought, Trillian, complained Zaphod. But do you really think it's wise under the circumstances? I mean, here we are on the run and everything. We must have the police of half the galaxy after us by now, and we stopped to pick up hitchhikers. Okay, so 10 out of 10 for style, but minus several million for good thinking, yeah? He tapped irritably at a control panel. Trillian quietly moved his hand before he tapped anything important. Whatever Zaphod's qualities of mind might include, dash, bravado, conceit, he was mechanically inept and could easily blow the ship up with an extravagant gesture. Trillian had come to suspect that the main reason he had such a wild and successful life was that he never really understood the significance of anything he did. Zaphod, she said patiently. They were floating unprotected in open space. You wouldn't want them to have died, would you? Well, you know, no. Not as such, but... Not as such. Not die as such, but... Trillian cocked her head on one side. Well, maybe someone else might have picked them up later. A second later and they would have been dead. Yeah, so if you'd taken the trouble to think about the problem a bit longer, it would have gone away. You'd have been happy to let them die? Well, you know, not as happy as such, but... Anyway, said Trillian, turning back to the controls, I didn't pick them up. What do you mean? Who picked them up then? The ship did. Huh? The ship did, all by itself. Huh? We were in improbability drive. But that's impossible. No, Zephod, just very, very improbable. Yeah. Look, Zephod, she said, patting his arm. Don't worry about the aliens. They're just a couple of guys as I expect. I'll send the robot down to get them and bring them up here. Hey, Marvin! In the corner, the robot's head swung up sharply, but then wobbled about imperceptibly. It pulled itself up to its feet as if it was about 5 pounds heavier than it actually was, and made what an outside observer would have thought was a heroic effort to cross the room. It stopped in front of Trillian and seemed to stare through its left shoulder. I think you ought to know I'm feeling very depressed, it said. Its voice was low and hopeless. Oh God, muttered Zephod, and slumped into his seat. Well, said Trillian in a bright, compassionate tone, here's something to occupy you and keep your mind off things. It won't work, droned Marvin. I have an exceptionally large mind. Marvin? Warned Trillian. Alright, said Marvin. What do you want me to do? Go down to number 2 entry bay and bring the 2 aliens up here under surveillance. With a microsecond pause and a finely calculated micromodulation of pitch and timbre, nothing you could actually take offense at, Marvin managed to convey his utter contempt and horror of all things human. Just that? He said. Yes, said Trillian firmly. I won't enjoy it, said Marvin. The Fod leapt out of his seat. She's not asking you to enjoy it, he shouted. Just do it, will you? All right, said Marvin, like the tolling of a great cracked bell. I'll do it. Good, snapped Zephod. Great. Thank you. Marvin turned and lifted his flat-topped triangular red eyes up toward him. I'm not getting you down at all, am I? Yeah, he said pathetically. No, Marvin, lilted Trillian. That's just fine, really. I wouldn't like to think I was getting you down. No, don't worry about that, the lilt continued. You just act as comes naturally, and everything will be just fine. You sure you don't mind? Probed Marvin. No, Marvin, lilted Trillian. That's just fine, really. Just part of life. Marvin flashed her an electronic look. Life, said Marvin. Don't talk to me about life. He turned hopelessly on his heel and lugged himself out of the cabin. With a satisfied hum and a click, the door closed behind him. I don't think I can stand that robot much longer, Zephod, growled Trillian. The Encyclopedia Galactica defines a robot as a mechanical apparatus designed to do the work of a man. The marketing division of the Cerealius Cybernetics Corporation defines a robot as your plastic pal who's fun to be with. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy defines the marketing division of the Cerealius Cybernetics Corporation as a bunch of mindless jerks who will be the first against the wall when the revolution comes. With a footnote to the effect that the editors would welcome applications from anyone interested in taking over the last of robotics correspondent. Curiously enough, an edition of the Encyclopedia Galactica that had the good fortune to fall through a time warp from 1,000 years in the future defined the marketing division of the Cerealius Cybernetics Corporation as a bunch of mindless jerks who were the first against the wall when the revolution came. The pink cubicle had winked out of existence. The monkeys had sunk away to a better dimension. Ford and Arthur found themselves in the embarkation area of the ship. It was rather smart. I think the ship's brand new, said Ford. How can you tell? Asked Arthur. Have you got some exotic device for measuring the age of metal? No, I just found this sales brochure lying on the floor. It's a lot of the universe can be yours stuff. Ah, look, I was right. Ford jabbed at one of the pages and showed it to Arthur. It says, sensational new breakthrough in improbability physics. As soon as the ship's drive reaches infinite improbability, it passes through every point in the universe. Be the envy of other major governments. Wow, this is big league stuff. Ford hunted excitedly through the technical specs of the ship, occasionally gasping with astonishment at what he read. Clearly galactic astrotechnology had moved ahead during the years of his exile. Arthur listened for a short while, but being unable to understand the vast majority of what Ford was saying, he began to let his mind wander, trailing his fingers along the edge of an incomprehensible computer bank. He reached out and pressed an invitingly large red button on a nearby panel. The panel lit up with the words, "Please do not press this button again." He shook himself. "Listen," said Ford, who was still engrossed in the sales brochure. "They make a big thing of the ship's cybernetics. A new generation of Sirius Cybernetics Corporation robots and computers with the new GPP feature." "GPP feature?" said Arthur. "What's that?" "Oh, it says genuine people personalities." "Oh," said Arthur. "Sounds ghastly." A voice behind them said, "It is." The voice was low and hopeless, and accompanied by a slight clanking sound. They spun around and saw an abject steel man standing hunched in the doorway. "What?" they said. "Ghastly," continued Marvin. "It all is. Absolutely ghastly. Just don't even talk about it. Look at this door," he said, stepping through it. The irony circuits cut into his voice modulator as he mimicked the style of the sales brochure. "All the doors in this spaceship have a cheerful and sunny disposition. It is their pleasure to open for you, and their satisfaction to close again with the knowledge of a job well done." As the door closed behind them, it became apparent that it did indeed have a satisfied psi-like quality to it. Yeah," it said. Marvin regarded it with cold loathing, while his logic circuits chattered with disgust and tinkered with the concept of directing physical violence against it. Further circuits cut in saying, "Why bother? What's the point? Nothing is worth getting involved in." Further circuits amused themselves by analyzing the molecular components of the door and of the humanoid's brain cells. For a quick encore, they measured this level of hydrogen emissions in the surrounding cubic parsec of space, and then shut down again in boredom. A spasm of despair shook the robot's body as he turned. "Come on," he droned. "I've been ordered to take you down to the bridge. Here I am, brain the size of a planet, and they asked me to take you down to the bridge. Call that job satisfaction? 'Cause I didn't." He turned and walked back to the hated door. Excuse me," said Ford, following after him. "Which government owns this ship?" Marvin ignored him. "You watch this door," he muttered. "It's about to open again. I can tell by the intolerable air of smugness it suddenly generates." With an ingratiating little whine, the door slid open again and Marvin stomped through. "Come on," he said. The others followed quickly and the door slid back into place with pleased little clicks and whirs. "Thank you, the marketing division of the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation," said Marvin, and trudged desolately up the gleaming curved corridor that stretched out before them. "Let's build robots with genuine people personalities," they said. So they tried it out with me. I'm a personality prototype. You can tell, can't you? Ford and Arthur muttered embarrassed little disclaimers. "I hate that door," continued Marvin. "I'm not getting you down at all, am I?" "Which government?" started Ford again. "No government owns it," snapped the robot. "It's been stolen." "Stolen?" "Stolen," mimicked Marvin. "Who by?" asked Ford. "Zaphod Beeblebrox." Something extraordinary happened to Ford's face. At least 5 entirely separate and distinct expressions of shock and amazement piled up on it in a jumbled mess. His left leg, which was in mid-stride, seemed to have difficulty in finding the floor again. He stared at the robot and tried to disentangle some dartoid muscles. "Zaphod Beeblebrox?" he said weakly. Sorry, did I say something wrong? Said Marvin, dragging himself on regardless. Pardon me for breathing, which I never do anyway, so I don't know why I bothered to say it. Oh God, I'm so depressed. Here's another of those self-satisfied doors. Life. Don't get me started about life. No one even mentioned it, muttered Arthur irritably. Ford, are you alright? Ford stared at him. Did that robot save Zaphod Beeblebrox? He said. End of chapter 11. Good ol' Marvin. Marvin. It's for Marvin. Bad Marvin. Bad. Don't get me started about life. Alright. Chapter 12. A loud clatter of gunk music flooded through the Heart of Gold cabin as Zaphod searched the sub-ether radio wavebands for news of himself. The machine was rather difficult to operate. For years, radios had been operated by means of pressing buttons and turning dials. Then, as the technology became more sophisticated, the controls were made touch-sensitive. You merely had to brush the panels with your fingers. Now all you had to do was wave your hand in the general direction of the components and hope. It saved a lot of muscular expenditure, of course, but it meant that you had to sit infuriatingly still if you wanted to keep listening to the same program. Zaphod waved a hand and the channel switched again. More gunk music, but this time it was a background to a news announcement. The news was always heavily edited to fit the rhythms of the music. And news reports brought to you here on the sub-ether rave band, broadcasting around the galaxy around the clock, squawked a voice. And we'll be saying a big hello to all intelligent life forms everywhere. And to everyone else out there, the secret is to bang the rocks together, guys. And of course, the big news story tonight is the sensational theft of the new improbability drive. Prototype shipped by none other than Galactic President Zaphod Beeblebrox. And the question everyone's asking is, has the big Z finally flipped? Beeblebrox, the man who invented the pan-galactic gargle blaster, ex-confidence trickster once described by Eccentrica Galambits as the best bang since the big one, and recently voted the worst-dressed sentient being in the known universe for the 7th time. Has he got an answer this time? We asked his private brain care specialist Gag Halfront. The music swirled and dived for a moment. Another voice broke in, presumably Halfront. He said, "Well, Zaphrod's just this guy, you know," but got no further because an electric pencil flew across the cabin and through the radio's on-off sensitive airspace. As Zaphod turned and glared at Trillian, she had thrown the pencil. "Hey," he said. "What'd you do that for?" Trillian was tapping her finger on a screen full of figures. "I've thought of something," she said. "Yeah? Worth interrupting a news bulletin about me for?" "You hear enough about yourself as it is. I'm very insecure. We know that. Can we drop your ego for a moment? This is important. If there's something more important than my ego around, I want it caught and shot now." Zaphod glared at her again, then laughed. "Listen," she said. "We picked up those couple of guys." "What couple of guys?" "The couple of guys we picked up." "Oh, yeah," said Zaphod. "Those couple of guys. We picked them up in Sector ZZ, plural Z, Alpha." "Yeah?" said Zaphod, and blinked. Trillian said quietly, "Does that mean nothing to you?" Said Zaphod. ZZ, plural Z, Alpha. ZZ, plural Z, Alpha? "Well?" said Trillian. What does the Z mean?" said Zaphod. "Which one?" "Anyone." One of the major difficulties Trillian experienced in her relationship with Zaphod was learning to distinguish between him pretending to be stupid just to get people off their guard, pretending to be stupid because he couldn't be bothered to think and wanted someone else to do it for him, pretending to be outrageously stupid to hide the fact that he actually didn't understand what was going on, and really being genuinely stupid. He was renowned for being amazingly clever and quite clearly was so, but not all the time, which obviously worried him, hence the act. He preferred people to be puzzled rather than contemptuous. This, above all, appeared to Trillian to be genuinely stupid, but she could no longer be bothered to argue about it. She sighed and punched up a star map on the Visa screen so she could make it simple for him, whatever his reasons for wanting it to be that way. There, she pointed. Right there. Hey. Yeah, said Zafad. Well, she said. Well, what? Parts of the inside of her head screamed at other parts of the inside of her head. She said very calmly, It's the same sector you originally picked me up in. He looked at her and then looked back at the screen. Hey, yeah, he said. That is wild. We should have zapped straight into the middle of the Horsehead Nebula. How did we come to be there? I mean, that's nowhere. She ignored this. Improbability drive, she said patiently. You explained it to me yourself. We passed through every point in the universe. You know that. Yeah, but that's one wild coincidence, isn't it? Yes. Picking someone up at that point, out of the whole of the universe to choose from? That's just too... I want to work this out. Computer! The Sirius Cybernetics shipboard computer, which controlled and permeated every particle of the ship, switched into communication mode. Hi there, it said brightly and simultaneously spewed out a tiny ribbon of ticker tape just for the record. The ticker tape said, Hi there. Oh god, said Zafad. He hadn't worked with this computer for long, but had already learned to loathe it. The computer continued, brash and cheery as if it were selling detergent. I want you to know that whatever your problem, I am here to help you solve it. Yeah, said Zafad. Look, I think I'll just use a piece of paper. Sure thing, said the computer, spilling out its message to a wastebin at the same time. I understand. If you ever want... Shut up, said Zafad, and snatching up a pencil sat down next to Trillian at the console. Okay, said the computer in a hurt tone of voice and closed down its speech channel again. Zafad and Trillian pored over the figures that the improbability flight path scanner flashed silently up in front of them. Can we work out, said Zafad, from their point of view, what the improbability of their rescue was? Yes, that's a constant, said Trillian. 2 to the power of 276,709 to 1 against. That's high. They're two lucky guys. Yes. But relative to what we were doing when the ship picked them up, Trillian punched up the numbers. They showed 2 to the power of infinity minus 1 to 1 against, an irrational number that only has a conventional meaning in improbability physics. It's pretty low, continued Zafad with a slight whistle. Yes, agreed Trillian, and looked at him quizzically. That's one big whack of improbability to be accounted for. Something pretty improbable has got to show up on the balance sheet if it's going to add up to a pretty sum. Zafad scribbled a few sums, crossed them out, and threw the pencil away. That's doze. I can't work it out. Well? Zafad knocked his two heads together in irritation and gritted his teeth. Okay, he said. Computer! The voice circuit sprang to life again. Why, hello there, they said. Ticker tape, ticker tape. All I want to do is make your day nicer and nicer and nicer. Yeah, well shut up and work something out for me. Sure thing, chattered the computer. You want a probability forecast based on improbability data, yeah. Okay, the computer continued. Here's an interesting little notion. Did you realize that most people's lives are governed by telephone numbers? A pained look crawled across one of Zafad's faces and onto the other one. Have you flipped? He said. No, but you will when I tell you that. Trillian gasped. She scrabbled at the buttons on the improbability flight path screen. Telephone number? She said. Did that thing say telephone number? Numbers flashed up on the screen. The computer had paused politely, but now it continued. What I was about to say was that... Don't bother, please, said Trillian. Look, what is this? Said Zafad. I don't know, said Trillian, but those aliens... They're on the way up to the bridge with that wretched robot. Can we pick them up on any monitor cameras? End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. Marvin trudged on down the corridor, still moaning. And then, of course, I've got this terrible pain in all the diodes down my left-hand side. No, said Arthur grimly as he walked along beside him. Really? Oh, yes, said Marvin. I mean, I've asked for them to be replaced, but no one ever listens. I can imagine. Vague whistling and humming voices were coming from Ford. Well, 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 he kept saying to himself. Zaphod Beeblebrox. Suddenly Marvin stopped and held up a hand. You know what's happened now, of course. No, what? Said Arthur, who didn't want to know. We've arrived at another one of those doors. There's a sliding door let into the side of the corridor. Marvin eyed it suspiciously. Well, said Ford impatiently. Do we go through? Do we go through? Mimicked Marvin. Yes, this is the entrance to the bridge. I was told to take you to the bridge. Probably the highest demand that will be made on my intellectual capacities today. I shouldn't wonder. Slowly, with great loathing, he stepped toward the door like a hunter stalking his prey. Suddenly, it slid open. Thank you, it said, for making a simple door very happy. Deep in Marvin's thorax, gears ground. Funny, he intoned funerally. How just when you think life can't possibly get any worse, it suddenly does. He heaved himself through the door and left Ford and Arthur staring at each other and shrugging their shoulders. From inside, they heard Marvin's voice again. I suppose you'll want to see the aliens now, he said. Do you want me to sit in a corner and rest, or just fall apart where I'm standing? Yeah, just show them in, would you, Marvin? Came another voice. Arthur looked at Ford and was astonished to see him laughing. What's... Shh, said Ford. Come on in. He stepped through into the bridge. Arthur followed him in nervously and was astonished to see a man lolling back in a chair with his feet on a control console, picking the teeth in his right-hand head with his left hand. The right-hand head seemed to be thoroughly preoccupied with this task, but the left-hand one was grinning a broad, relaxed, nonchalant grin. The number of things that Arthur couldn't believe he was seeing was fairly large. His jaw flopped about at a loose end for a while. The peculiar man waved a lazy wave at Ford, and with an appalling affection of nonchalance said, Ford, hi, how are you? Glad you could drop in. Ford was not going to be out-cooled. Zaphod, he drawled. Great to see you. You're looking well. The extra arms suit you. Nice ship you've stolen. Arthur goggled at him. You mean you know this guy? He said, waving a wild finger at Zaphod. Know him? Exclaimed Ford. He paused and decided to do the instructions the other way around. The introductions the other way around. Oh, Zaphod, this is a friend of mine, Arthur Dent, he said. I saved him when his planet blew up. Oh, sure, said Zaphod. Hi, Arthur. Glad you could make it. His right-hand head looked around casually, said hi, and went back to having his teeth picked. Ford carried on. And Arthur, he said, this is my semi-cousin Zaphod Beeble. We've met, said Arthur sharply. When you're cruising down the road in the fast lane and you lazily sail past a hard-driving cars and are feeling pretty pleased with yourself and then accidentally change down from fourth to first instead of third, plus making your engine leap out of your hood in a rather ugly mess, it tends to throw you off your stride in much the same way that this remark threw Ford Prefect off his. What? He said. I said we've met. Zaphod gave an awkward start of surprise and jabbed a gum sharply. Hey, have we? Ford rounded on Arthur with an angry flash in his eyes. Now he felt he was back on home ground. He suddenly began to resent having lumbered himself with this ignorant primitive who knew as much about the affairs of the galaxy as an Ilford-based gnat knew about life and pecking. What do you mean you've met? He demanded. This is Zaphod Beeblebrox from Betelgeuse 5, you know, not bloody Martin Smith from Croydon. I don't know. I don't care, said Arthur coldly. We've met, haven't we, Zaphod Beeblebrox? Or should I say, Bill? What? Shouted Ford. You'll have to remind me, said Zaphod. I have a terrible memory for species. It was at a party, pursued Arthur. Yeah, well, I doubt that, said Zaphod. Cool it, will you, Arthur? Demanded Ford. Arthur would not be deterred. A party 6 months ago, on Earth, England. Zaphod shook his head with a tight-lipped smile. London, insisted Arthur. Islington. Oh, said Zaphod with a guilty start. That party. This wasn't fair on Ford at all. He looked backward and forward between Arthur and Zaphod. What? He said to Zaphod. You don't mean to say you've been on that miserable little planet as well, do you? No, of course not, said Zaphod breezily. Well, I may have just dropped in briefly, you know, on my way elsewhere. But I was stuck on there for 15 years. Well, I didn't know that, did I? But what were you doing there? Looking about, you know. He gate-crashed a party, said Arthur, trembling with anger. A fancy dress party. It would have to be, wouldn't it? Said Ford. At this party, persisted Arthur, was a girl. Oh, well, look. It doesn't matter now. The whole place has gone up in smoke anyway. I wish you'd stop sulking about that bloody planet, said Ford. Who was the lady? Oh, just somebody. Well, alright. I wasn't doing very well with her. I'd been trying all evening. Hell, she was something though. Beautiful, charming, devastatingly intelligent, and was plying her with a bit of talk when this friend of yours barges up and says, Hey doll, is this guy boring you? Why don't you talk to me instead? I'm from a different planet. Never saw her again. Zaphod? Exclaimed Ford. Yes, said Arthur, glaring at him and trying not to feel foolish. He only had the 2 arms and the 1 head, and he called himself Phil, but you must admit he did turn out to be from another planet, said Trillian, wandering into sight at the other end of the bridge. She gave Arthur a pleasant smile which settled on him like a ton of bricks, and then turned her attention to the ship's controls again. There was silence for a few seconds, and then out of the scrambled mess of Arthur's brain crawled some words. Tricia McMillan? He said. What are you doing here? Same as you, she said. I hitched a lift. After all, with a degree in math and another in astrophysics, what else was there to do? It was either that or the dull queue again on Monday. Infinity -1, chattered the computer. Improbability sum now complete. Zaphod looked at him, at Ford, at Arthur, and then at Trillian. Trillian, he said, is this sort of thing going to happen every time we use the improbability drive? Very probably, I'm afraid, she said. End of chapter 13. Chapter 14. The Heart of Gold fled on silently through the night of space, now on conventional photon drive. Its crew of 4 were ill at ease, knowing that they had been brought together not of their own volition or by simple coincidence, but by some curious perversion of physics, as if relationships between people were susceptible to the same laws that governed the relationships between atoms and molecules. As the ship's artificial night closed in, they were each grateful to retire to separate cabins and try to rationalize their thoughts. Trillian couldn't sleep. She sat on a couch and stared at a small cage which contained her last and only links with Earth, 2 white mice that she had insisted Zaphod let her bring. She had expected never to see the planet again, but she was disturbed by her negative reaction to the news of the planet's destruction. It seemed remote and unreal, and she could find no thoughts to think about it. She watched the mice scurrying about the cage and running furiously in their little plastic treadwheels until they occupied her whole attention. Suddenly she shook herself and went back onto the bridge to watch over the tiny flashing lights and figures that charted the ship's progress through the void. She wished she knew what it was she was trying not to think about. Zaphod couldn't sleep. He also wished he knew what it was that he wouldn't let himself think about. For as long as he could remember, he'd suffered from a vague nagging feeling of being not all there. Most of the time, he was able to put this thought aside and not worry about it, but it had been reawakened by the sudden, inexplicable arrival of Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent. Somehow it seemed to conform to a pattern that he couldn't see. Ford couldn't sleep. He was too excited about being back on the road again. 15 years of virtual imprisonment were over, just as he was finally beginning to give up hope. Knocking about with Zaphod for a bit promised to be a lot of fun, though there seemed to be something faintly odd about his semi-cousin that he couldn't quite put his finger on. The fact that he had become president of the galaxy was frankly astonishing, as was the manner of his leaving the post. Was there a reason behind it? There would be no point in asking Safad. He never appeared to have a reason for anything he did at all. He had turned unfathomability into an art form. He attacked everything in life with a mixture of extraordinary genius and naive incompetence, and it was often difficult to tell which was which. Arthur slept. He was terribly tired. There was a tap at Safad's door. It slid open. Safad? Yeah? Trillion stood outlined in the oval of light. I think we just found what you came to look for. Hey, yeah? Ford gave up the attempt to sleep. In the corner of his cabin was a small computer screen and keyboard. He sat at it for a while and tried to compose a new entry for the guide on the subject of Vogons, but couldn't think of anything vitriolic enough so he gave that up too, wrapped a robe around himself, and went for a walk to the bridge. As he entered, he was surprised to see two figures hunched excitedly over the instruments. See? The ship's about to move into orbit, Trillion was saying. There's a planet out there. It's at the exact coordinates you predicted. Fod heard a noise and looked up. Ford, he hissed. Hey, come and look at this. Ford went and had a look at it. It was a series of figures flickering over a screen. You recognize these galactic coordinates? Said Safad. No? I'll give you a clue. Computer! Hi, gang! Enthused the computer. This is getting real sociable, isn't it? Shut up, said Safad, and show up the screens. Light on the bridge sank. Pinpoints of light played across the consoles and reflected in 4 pairs of eyes that stared up at the external monitor screens. There was absolutely nothing on them. Recognize that? Whispered Safad. Ford frowned. No? He said. What do you see? Nothing. Recognize it? What are you talking about? We're in the Horsehead Nebula, one whole vast dark cloud. And I was meant to recognize that from a blank screen? Inside a dark nebula is the only place in the galaxy you'd see a dark screen. Very good. Safad laughed. He was clearly very excited about something, almost childly so. Hey, this is really terrific. This is just far too much. What's so great about being stuck in a dust cloud? Said Ford. What would you reckon to find there? Urged Safad. Nothing. No stars? No planets? No. Computer! Shouted Safad. Rotate angle of vision through 180 degrees and don't talk about it. For a moment it seemed that nothing was happening. Then a brightness glowed at the edge of the huge screen. A red star the size of a small plate crept across it, followed quickly by another one. A binary system. Then a vast crescent sliced into the corner of the picture. A red glare shading away into deep black, the night side of the planet. I found it! Cried Safad, thumping the console. I found it! Ford stared at it in astonishment. What is it? He said. That, said Safad, is the most improbable planet that ever existed. End of chapter 14. Chapter 15. Excerpt from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, page 634784, section 5A, entry Magrathia. Far back in the mists of ancient time, in the great and glorious days of the former galactic empire, life was wild, rich, and largely tax-free. Mighty starships plied their way between exotic suns, seeking adventure and reward among the farthest reaches of galactic space. In those days, spirits were brave, the stakes were high, men were real men, women were real women, and small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri were real small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri. And all dared to brave unknown terrors, to do mighty deeds, to boldly split infinitives that no man had split before, and thus was the empire forged. Many men, of course, became extremely rich, but this was perfectly natural and nothing to be ashamed of because no one was really poor, at least no one worth speaking of. And for all the richest and most successful merchants' life inevitably became rather dull and niggly, and they began to imagine that this was therefore the fault of the worlds they'd settled on. None of them was entirely satisfactory. Either the climate wasn't quite right in the latter part of the afternoon, or the day was half an hour too long, or the sea was exactly the wrong shade of pink. And thus were created the conditions for a staggering new form of specialist industry, custom-made luxury planet building. The home of this industry was the planet Magrathia, where hyperspatial engineers sucked matter through white holes in space to form it into dream planets, gold planets, platinum planets, soft rubber planets with lots of earthquakes, all lovingly made to meet the exacting standards that the galaxy's richest men naturally came to expect. But so successful was this venture that Magrathia itself soon became the richest planet of all time, and the rest of the galaxy was reduced to abject poverty. And so the system broke down, the empire collapsed, and a long sullen silence settled over a billion hungry worlds, disturbed only by the pen-scratchings of scholars as they labored into the night over smug little treatises on the value of a planned political economy. Magrathia itself disappeared, and its memory soon passed into the obscurity of legend. In these enlightened days, of course, no one believes a word of it. Homies, blissful. End of chapter 15. You missed some. Yeah. We're... Actually, let me check this. Okay. We're probably gonna do one more chapter, and that'll be our hour mark. So I'll have it on up on YouTube here this weekend though, so you guys will be able to catch up. But nice to see you guys. Nice to see ya. Hope you guys are good. Chapter 16. Arthur awoke to the sound of argument and went to the bridge. Ford was waving his arms about. "You're crazy, Zaphod," he was saying. "Magrathia is a myth, a fairy story. It's what parents tell their kids about at night if they want them to grow up to become economists. And that's what we are currently in orbit about," insisted Zaphod. "Look, I can't help what you may personally be in orbit around," said Ford, "but this ship—" "Computer!" shouted Zaphod. Oh no. "Hi there, this is Eddie, your shipboard computer, and I'm feeling just great, guys, and I know that I'm just going to get a bundle of kicks out of any program you care to run through me." Arthur looked inquiringly at Trillian. She motioned him to come on in, but kept quiet. "Computer," said Zaphod, "tell us what our present trajectory is." "A real pleasure, feller," it blurbled. "We are currently in orbit at an altitude of 300 miles around the legendary planet of Magrathia." "Proving nothing," said Ford. "I wouldn't trust that computer to speak my weight." "I can do that for you, sure," enthused the computer, punching out more ticker tape. "I can even work out your personality problems to 10 decimal places if it'll help." Trillian interrupted. "Zaphod," she said, "any minute now we will be swinging around to the daylight side of this planet," adding, "whatever it turns out to be." "Hey, what do you mean by that? The planet's where I predicted it would be, isn't it?" "Yes, I know there's a planet there. I'm not arguing with anyone. It's just that I wouldn't know Magrathia from any other lump of cold rock. Dawn's coming up if you want it." Okay, muttered Zaphod. "Let's at least give our eyes a good time." "Computer!" "Hi there, what can I—" "Just shut up and give us a view of the planet again." A dark featureless mass once more filled the screens, the planet rolling away beneath them. They watched for a moment in silence, but Zaphod was fidgety with excitement. "We are now traversing the night side," said in a hushed voice. The planet rolled on. "The surface of the planet is now 300 miles beneath us," he continued. He was trying to restore a sense of occasion to what he felt should have been a great moment. Magrathia. He was piqued by Ford's skeptical reaction. Magrathia. "In a few seconds," he continued, "we should see—" There! The moment carried itself. Even the most seasoned star tramp can't help but shiver at the spectacular drama of a sunrise seen from space, but a binary sunrise is one of the marvels of the galaxy. Out of the utter blackness stabbed a sudden point of blinding light. It crept up by slight degrees and spread sideways in a thin crescent blade, and within seconds 2 suns were visible, furnaces of light, searing the black edge of the horizon with white fire. Fierce shafts of color streaked through the thin atmosphere beneath them. "Fires of dawn," breathed Zaphod. "The twin sons of Sulianus and Ram." "Or whatever," said Ford quietly. "Sulianus and Ram," insisted Zaphod. The suns blazed into the pitch of space, and a low, ghostly music floated through the bridge. Marvin was humming ironically because he hated humans so much. As Ford gazed at the spectacle of light before them, excitement burned inside him, but only the excitement of seeing a strange new planet. It was enough for him to see it as it was. It faintly irritated him that Zaphod had to impose some ludicrous fantasy onto the scene to make it work for him. All this McGrathia nonsense seemed juvenile. Isn't it enough to see that a garden is beautiful without having to believe that there are fairies at the bottom of it too? All this McGrathia business seemed totally incomprehensible to Arthur. He edged up to Trillian and asked her what was going on. "I only know what Zaphod's told me," she whispered. "Apparently, McGrathia is some kind of legend from way back which no one seriously believes in. Bit like Atlantis on Earth, except that the legends say that the McGrathians used to manufacture planets." Arthur blinked at the screens and felt he was missing something important. Suddenly he realized what it was. "Is there any tea on this spaceship?" he asked. More of the planet was unfolding beneath him as the heart of gold streaked along its orbital path. The suns now stood high in the black sky, the pyrotechnics of dawn were over, and the surface of the planet appeared bleak and forbidding in the common light of the day. Gray, dusty, and only dimly contoured. It looked dead and cold as a crypt. From time to time, promising features would appear on the distant horizon. Ravines, maybe mountains, maybe even cities. But as they approached, the lines would soften and blur into anonymity, and nothing would transpire. The planet's surface was blurred by time, by the slow movement of the thin, stagnant air that had crept across it for century upon century. Clearly, it was very, very old. A moment of doubt came to Ford as he watched the great landscape move beneath them. The immensity of time worried him. He could feel it as a presence. He cleared his throat. "Well, even supposing it is," said Zaphod. "Which it isn't," continued Ford. "What do you want with it anyway? There's nothing there." "Not on the surface," said Zaphod. "Alright, just supposing there's something, I take it you're not here for the sheer industrial archaeology of it all. What are you after?" One of Zaphod's heads looked away. The other one looked around to see what the first was looking at, but it wasn't looking at anything really much. "Well," said Zaphod airily, "it's partly the curiosity, partly a sense of adventure, but mostly I think it's the fame and the money." Ford glanced at him sharply. He got a very strong impression that Zaphod hadn't the faintest idea of why he was there at all. "You know, I don't take the look of that planet at all. I don't like the look of that planet at all," said Trillian, shivering. "Ah, take no notice," said Zaphod. "With half the wealth of the former Galactic Empire stored on it somewhere, it can afford to look frumpy." "Bullshit," thought Ford. "Even supposing this was the home of some ancient civilization now gone to dust, even supposing a number of exceedingly unlikely things, there was no way that vast treasures of wealth were going to be stored there in any form that would still have meaning now." He shrugged. "I think it's just a dead planet," he said. "The suspense is killing me," said Arthur testily. Stress and nervous tension are now serious social problems in all parts of the galaxy, and it's in order that this situation should not be in any way exacerbated that the following facts will now be revealed in advance. The planet in question is, in fact, the legendary McGrathia. The deadly missile attack shortly to be launched by an ancient automatic defense system will result merely in the breakage of 3 coffee cups and a mouse cage, the bruising of somebody's upper arm, and the untimely creation and sudden demise of a bowl of petunias and an innocent sperm whale. In order that some sense of mystery should still be preserved, no revelation will yet be made concerning whose upper arm sustains the bruise. This fact may safely be made the subject of suspense, since it is of no significance whatsoever. End of Chapter 16. Chapter 17. After a fairly shaky start to the day, Arthur's mind was beginning to reassemble itself from the shell-shocked fragments the previous day had left him with. He had found a nutrimatic machine which had provided him with a plastic cup filled with a liquid that was almost, but not quite, entirely unlike tea. The way it functioned was very interesting. When the drink button was pressed, it made an instant but highly detailed examination of the subject's taste buds, a spectroscopic analysis of the subject's metabolism, and then sent tiny experimental signals down the neural pathways to the taste centers of the subject's brain to see what was likely to go down well. However, no one knew quite why it did this, because it invariably delivered a cup full of liquid that was almost, but not quite, entirely unlike tea. The Nutrimatic was designed and manufactured by the Sirius Cybernetics Corporation, whose complaints department now covers all the major landmasses of the first 3 planets in the Sirius Tau-SAR system. Arthur drank the liquid and found it reviving. He glanced up at the screens again, and watched a few more 100 miles of barren grayness slide past. It suddenly occurred to him to ask a question that had been bothering him. "Is it safe?" he said. "Magrathia has been dead for 5 million years, said Safad. "Of course it's safe. Even the ghosts will have settled down and raised families by now." At which point a strange and inexplicable sound thrilled suddenly through the bridge, a noise as of a distant fanfare, a hollow, reedy, insubstantial sound. It preceded a voice that was equally hollow, reedy, and insubstantial. The voice said, "Greetings to you." Someone from the dead planet was talking to them. "Computer!" shouted Safad. "Hi there! What the photon is it?" "Oh, just some 5 million-year-old tape that's being broadcast at us." "A what? A recording?" "Shush," said Ford. "It's carrying on." The voice was old, courteous, almost charming, but was underscored with quite unmistakable menace. "This is a recorded announcement," it said, "as I'm afraid we're all out at the moment. The Commercial Council of Magrathia thanks you for your esteemed visit." A voice from ancient Magrathia, shouted Safad. Okay, said Ford. "But regrets," continued the voice, "that the entire planet is temporarily closed for business. Thank you. If you would care to leave your name and the address of a planet where you can be contacted, kindly speak when you hear the tone." A short buzz followed, then silence. "They want to get rid of us," said Trillian nervously. "What do we do?" "It's just a recording," said Safad. "We keep going. Got that, computer?" "I got it," said the computer, and gave the ship an extra kick of speed. They waited. After a second or so came the fanfare once again, and then the voice. "We would like to assure you that as soon as our business is resumed, announcements will be made in all fashionable magazines and color supplements, when our clients will once again be able to select from all that's best in contemporary geography." The menace in the voice took on a sharper edge. "Meanwhile, we thank our clients for their kind interest and would ask them to leave. Now." Arthur looked around at the nervous faces of his companions. "Well, I suppose we'd better be going then, hadn't we?" he suggested. "Shh," said Safad. "There's absolutely nothing to be worried about." "Then why is everyone so tense?" "They're just interested," shouted Safad. "Computer, start descent into the atmosphere and prepare for landing." This time the fanfare was quite perfunctory, the voice now distinctly cold. "It is most gratifying," it said, "that your enthusiasm for our planet continues unabated, and so we would like to assure you that the Gilded missiles currently converging with your ship are part of a special service we extend to all of our most enthusiastic clients, and the fully armed nuclear warheads are of course merely a courtesy detail. We look forward to your custom in future lives. Thank you." The voice snapped off. "Oh," said Trillian. Arthur. "Well," said Ford. "Look," said Safad, Will you get it into your heads that's just a recorded message. It's millions of years old. It doesn't apply to us. Get it?" "What?" said Trillian quietly. "About the missiles." "Missiles? Don't make me laugh." Ford tapped Safad on the shoulder and pointed it at the rear screen. Clear in the distance behind them, 2 silver darts were climbing through the atmosphere toward the ship. A quick change of magnification brought them into close focus. 2 massively real rockets thundering through the sky. The suddenness of it was shocking. "I think they're going to have a very good try at applying it to us," said Ford. Safad stared at them in astonishment. "Hey, this is terrific," he said. "Someone down there is trying to kill us." "Terrific," said Arthur. "But don't you see what this means?" "Yes, we're gonna die." "Yes, but apart from that." "Apart from that?" "It means that we must be onto something." How soon can we get off it? Second by second, the image of the missiles on the screen grew larger. They had swung around now onto a direct homing course so that all that could be seen of them now was the warheads, head-on. As a matter of interest, said Trillian, what are we gonna do? Just keep cool, said Safad. Is that all? Shouted Arthur. No, we're going to, take evasive action, said Safad with a sudden ease of panic. Computer, what evasive action can we take? None, I'm afraid, guys, said the computer. Or something, said Safad. He said, There seems to be something jamming my guidance systems, explained the computer brightly. Impact minus 45 seconds. Please call me, Eddie, if it will help you to relax. Safad tried to run in several equally decisive directions simultaneously. Right, he said. We've got to get manual control of this ship. Can you fly her? Said Ford pleasantly. No, can you? No. Trillian, can you? No. Fine, said Safad, relaxing. We'll do it together. I can't either, said Arthur, who felt it was time he began to assert himself. I'd guess that, said Safad. Okay, computer, I want full manual control now. You got it, said the computer. Several large desk panels slid open and banks of control panels sprang up around them, showering the crew with bits of expanded polyester packaging and balls of rolled-up cellophane. These controls had never been used before. Safad stared at them wildly. Okay, Ford, he said. Full retro thrust and 10 degrees starboard, or something. Good luck, guys, chirped the computer. Impact minus 30 seconds. Ford leaped to the controls. Only a few of them made any immediate sense to him, so he pulled those. The ship shook and screamed as its guidance rocket jets tried to push it every which way simultaneously. He released half of them, and the ship spun around in a tight arc and headed back the way it had came, straight toward the oncoming missiles. Air cushions ballooned out of the walls in an instant as everyone was thrown against them. For a few seconds, the inertial forces held them flattened and squirming for breath, unable to move. Safad struggled and pushed in manic desperation and finally managed a savage kick at a small lever that formed part of the guidance system. The lever snapped off. The ship twisted sharply and rocketed upward. The crew were hurled violently back across the cabin. Ford's copy of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy smashed into another section of the control console, with the combined result that the guide started to explain to anyone who cared to listen about the best ways of smuggling Antarian parakeet glands out of Antares. An Antarian parakeet gland stuck on a small stick is a revolting but much sought-after cocktail delicacy, and very large sums of money are often paid for them by rich idiots who want to impress other very rich idiots. And the ship suddenly dropped out of the sky like a stone. It was, of course, more or less at this moment that one of the crew sustained a nasty bruise to the upper arm. This should be emphasized because, as has already been revealed, they escape otherwise completely unharmed, and the deadly nuclear missiles do not eventually hit the ship. The safety of the crew is absolutely assured. Impact minus 20 seconds, guys, said the computer. Then turn the bloody engines back on, bawled Safad. Oh, sure thing, guys, said the computer. With a subtle roar, the engines cut back on. The ship smoothly flattened out of its dive and headed back toward the missiles again. The computer started to sing. When you walk through the storm, it whined nasally. Hold your head up high. Safad screamed at it to shut up, but his voice was lost in the din of what they quite naturally assumed it was approaching destruction. And don't be afraid of the dark, Eddie wailed. The ship, in flattening out, had in fact flattened out upside down and lying on the ceiling as they were. Oh my god, hello? The ship, in flattening out, had in fact flattened out upside down and lying on the ceiling as they were. It was now totally impossible for any of the crew to reach the guidance systems. At the end of the storm, crooned Eddie. The two missiles loomed massively on the screens as they thundered toward the ship. Is a golden sky, but by an extraordinarily lucky chance they had not yet fully corrected their flight paths to that of the erratically weaving ship, and they passed right under it. And the sweet silver song of the lark. Revised impact time 15 seconds, fellas. Walk on through the wind. The missiles banked round in a screeching arc and plunged back in pursuit. This is it, said Arthur, watching them. We're now quite definitely going to die, aren't we? I wish you'd stop saying that, shouted Ford. Well, we are, aren't we? Yes. Walk on through the rain, sang Hetty. A thought struck Arthur. He struggled to his feet. Why doesn't anyone turn on this improbability drive thing? He said. We could probably reach that. What are you, crazy? Said Safad. Without proper programming, anything could happen. Does that matter at this stage? Shouted Arthur. Through your dreams be tossed and blown, sang Eddie. Arthur scrambled up on to one of the excitingly chunky pieces of molded contouring where the curve of the wall met the ceiling. Does anyone know why Arthur can't turn on the improbability drive? Shouted Trillian. And you'll never walk alone. Impact -5 seconds. It's been great knowing you guys. God bless. I said, yelled Trillian. Does anyone know? The next thing that happened was a mind-mangling explosion of noise and light. End of chapter 17. Yo, I feel like I had that song at the beginning, and then as it like kind of continued on, I was like, wait, I don't remember this part of this song. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. All right, that will conclude it for this week. All right, so for everybody interested, the next reading stream I'm gonna try to do Sunday at 6:30 p.m. PST. So expect another stream for this then. As long as I, you know, I'm still, this is all like tentative, but that is the plan, is that I will be there then. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in for the reading. Yeah, like I said, Sunday will be the next one. I'll add everybody on my Discord. If you're not on the Discord, let's put this up. Discord. Oh, and actually, I have my YouTube on here. There's the YouTube. I have to go, but I hope you have an amazing stream. Yeah, thanks, Tomar. Yeah, just gonna be playing Elden Ring. Let me turn off this book here. But yeah, I appreciate you hanging out and listening. Okay, I'm gonna go. I'll be right back, and then we will play some Elden Ring. Thank you guys. Alright, goodbye, goodbye, so long, farewell, I'll be and goodbye.